Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. The final part of the coding is finally here. So in the last two lectures, we have been talking about the theoretical aspect of solving Navier-Stokes equation, and today we are actually going to do it in MATLAB. So this lecture is going to be a progressive lecture from the past two lectures, and the outline of the today's lecture is simply to take the previous two lectures and code them in MATLAB. So firstly, I would describe the way in which we would set up the problem, such as what kind of variables do we need to initialize the problem, and after that, how can we solve the governing equations, which are the u and v momentum equations and then the continuity equation. Finally, the two important parts after that is first to check if our solution is correct. So we'll do that by comparing our results with that of a benchmark solution, and only after that we would see how we can visualize the flow field. So for that, we would first use the traditional contour kind of visualization, and secondly we would do what is called a vector visualization, in which we would see how the flow field would actually look like. So that would be the overall outline for today's lecture, and let me start with the initialization of the problem first. So if we look at the governing equations, that are the 2D incompressible Navier-Stokes, we have two parameters that are needed for initialization. The first one is the artificial compressibility, this delta, and the second parameter would be the Reynolds number. So once we initialize the domain and give the properties their value, after that we can start to initialize these u and v velocity fields. So let me show you the code that I have written for the lid-driven cavity flow, where we would be solving the Navier-Stokes equation. So as always, we start with the first three lines, that is to clear all the variables, close all the figures, and clean the command window. Then we define the problem domain. So as an example here, I am taking 51 points in total, and I'm defining that variable as n points. And the domain length is equal to 1, which is also equal to the domain height. And corresponding to this, we have a grid spacing h, which is defined as 1 over 50. So based on these, we can define our x domain and y domain, which is nothing but the values of x coordinate and y coordinate for all of the points. So we know that our domain starts from 0, and the grid spacing is h, and it goes all the way until 1. So hopefully this would be nothing new, as we have been doing the same thing in the last few lectures where we were talking about the 2D problems. After that, there are these three parameters that I'm defining here. The first one is the dt, which I'm taking to advance the Navier-Stokes equation or the continuity equation in time, so that we can continue the iterative process. And then I'm defining a Reynolds number of 100 and a delta of 4.5. So here I'm taking an example with the Reynolds number 100, because Reynolds number 100 is not a very high Reynolds number. So in general, the problem would be a little bit less non-linear, so it would converge a bit faster. So you can try it with a higher Reynolds number. We have benchmark solutions of Reynolds number of until 5000. So you can try for a higher Reynolds number, and you would see that the solution may not be very quick to converge, or you might have to play around with the delta x or delta t to get a converged solution. So once we have defined the problem domain, then comes about initializing the variables. So before I go into that, because we are using a staggered grid system, let me tell you a little bit about the variables. So this is the grid system that we are using. So if you remember, these blue points, these are our physical domain. So these are the grid points on which we finally want the solution, whereas the red ones are the staggered u velocity, the green one is the staggered v velocity, and the black points correspond to pressure. So if I take this example of this particular scenario where we have a 5x5 physical domain system on which we want the solution, corresponding to this 5x5, where first 5 corresponds to the row, so 5 row, 5 column, we see that the corresponding u field has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 rows and 5 columns. So the corresponding u velocity variable would have one extra row into that, and similarly the corresponding v velocity variable would have correspondingly one extra column. So it is 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but 6 columns. And similarly, you can see that the corresponding pressure points, they are one extra in x and one extra in y. So one extra row and one extra column. So that is where you have to do a bit of bookkeeping. So our physical domain is 5 by 5, where the staggered variables are a little bit more than that. So first we initialize the physical variables. I'm saying that physical variable is called as u final because that's where we finally want the solution in. So I'm defining u final at, so because the number of points is 51 here, so you can think of that as 51 by 51 being equals to 0. Same for v, and I'm defining a pressure of 1. And because the boundary condition for lid driven cavity flow is that the top wall has a velocity of 1, therefore the u final on the first row. So remember that if there is something horizontal, that's the first row. So correspondingly, the u final at the first row is equal to 1. Now for the staggered variables, we are defining two variables just like the previous lecture. One variable would be used in the iterative process and the second variable would be the new variable or the new value of that iterating variable. So we have u and u new, v and v new, p and p new. So based from the previous discussion, we have one extra row, that is n points plus 1 for the u variable, and the same for u new. We have one extra column for v and one extra row and one extra column for p. So that is the initialization of these u and v and p variables. But remember, because the top lid has a boundary velocity of 1, so we have to also take that into consideration. So to include that, if I'm defining these velocities, these second row velocities as 0, I have to define the top velocity to be equal to 2, because if I want a velocity of 1 here, and that requires me to define this topmost velocity as 2, because only then after interpolation we can get a velocity of 1 here. So this was also discussed in the last lecture. So if you haven't remembered it, please go through that. So that is done in the staggered u velocity, that we have a u of 0 everywhere except the topmost grid row to be defined as 2, so that the top lid velocity can be equal to 1. So when I'm saying top lid velocity, I meant the top physical velocity. So only that is supposed to be 1, everything else can be adjusted. Another way in which you can do it, you can also define both the first and the second row to be equal to 1, so that the center velocity which coincides with the physical velocity, that would be equal to 1. In this example, I'm doing as 2 and 0, but I've also tried it with 1 and 1, and that also works equally well. Before I go into the solution part, if these videos are helpful for you, I would really appreciate if you can consider supporting this channel through the link shown on the screen and also given in the description of this video. Through that support, we'll also support a local charity where food is provided to old and underprivileged people. And also on the same link, you can also consider contacting me for your CFD related academic or an industrial project, or if you need any specific course on a private basis, I would be happy to provide that. So back to the solution of the Navier-Stokes equation. So just like every other lecture where we have written a MATLAB code, we start with defining an error, which ultimately we want to go beyond a error required or an error threshold. So initially we say that we haven't done any iterations. And here I'm also plotting a figure. So I'm also opening a figure rather, which I would be using for error monitoring. So you might have seen that once the solution progresses, as the time steps go on, we see some changes in the error. Ideally, it should go down. Otherwise, it would be a big pain to debug the code. So I'm using this figure to monitor that error over the time or time steps. So I would be showing you later as to how I'm using this figure window But before that, we'll talk about the momentum and continuity equation. So we're saying that as long as the error is larger than the error required, we solve the governing equation. So we have the x momentum equation for the interior of the flow field. So these two for loops, they go about the row and the column for which the solution would be obtained. So let me go back to the 5x5 grid. So we know that the interior of the domain, it consists of these 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So it consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 rows and 1, 2, 3 column. So everything that goes from second, third, fourth and fifth row. So from second to fifth row and from second to fourth column. So exactly I'm writing that here, that from second to fifth row, if the endpoints are equal to 5, to second to fourth column. So once we do that, then we can define various pressure, diffusion and the two advection terms. So I would be briefly showing you that here. So we had done that in the past lecture. So I'll go back to the OneNote where we had done it. So we evaluated various pressure, the two convection terms and the diffusion term. So you can see that the pressure is defined as negative of P at I comma j plus 1 minus Pij divided by delta x. And exactly that we have here, P at I comma j plus 1 minus Pij divided by delta h. The two advection terms, we had the advection in the x direction or the x gradient term and the y gradient term. So we had del u square over del x, which is this particular term, and we are saying that it's uij plus 1 divided by 2. So let me cross check. So we have uij plus 1 divided by 2 raised to the power 2, which we have here in the form of a square, minus half of ij and ij minus 1. So that's exactly what's written here. So that's my C1 term, or the del u square divided by del x. Similarly, we have del uv by del y term, which is also coded here, but it's slightly bigger. So let me highlight that. So we have u at I comma j and I minus 1 comma j. So it's exactly the same thing. There's nothing new. So as long as we get the control volume and the control faces right, we would get it eventually right. And then we at I minus 1 comma j and I minus 1 comma j plus 1. So that is exactly the same here. And the rest of part is the same as well. I can assure you that. So once we have the pressure gradient, the diffusion and the convection term, then we can use the final form, which is the u at n plus 1, it equals u at n plus delta T times pressure plus diffusion minus convection. So we have u at n plus 1, or the u nu, equals to u at n, which is u I comma j plus delta T times diffusion plus pressure minus the two advection or the convection terms. So that is about the interior of the domain. And if you remember, in the last lecture, we also discussed about the boundary conditions. So I'll emphasize it here again. So for the boundary condition, we saw that the first row, the first column and the last column, from the second to the second last row, that is from the second to the fifth row, or the second to the endpoints row, they are equal to 0, because the boundary velocity is 0. So I'm doing the same here. So I'm saying that from 2 to endpoints in row, and the first column is equals to 0, and from 2 to endpoints and the last, that is the endpoint column, is also equals to 0. Then on the bottom boundary, we have the sixth row as the negative of the fifth row, remember? So because we want a velocity, physical velocity of 0 at this particular location, so that is why this particular variable, it would be negative of the fifth variable. So we can say that the endpoint plus 1 is equal to negative of the endpoints. So that is what we are writing here. And similarly, on the top row, we can say that the topmost grid velocity, that is first row, would be the 2 minus the second row, because we want the lid velocity as 1. So the same process is repeated for the v velocity. I hope that once you write the correct expression for the v velocities, so I would be showing it on your screen here. So for the v velocity, one thing to note here is that it would go from the second to the endpoints minus one row, whereas it would go for one extra column. And similarly, we can define all these four terms here. So I would highlight it here so that you can compare it with your terms. And similarly, we would define the V nu as V plus delta T times diffusion plus pressure minus the two advection terms. And similarly, we would also implement the boundary conditions. So we have the two boundary conditions at the, so let me go back to the figure. So we have the top and the bottom boundary is supposed to be 0. So the first and the last row, so the first and the last row, they are being equals to 0, while the first and the last column, they are correspondingly negative of second and the second last column. So that is about the V momentum equation. And finally, about the continuity equation, we already derived the, where is that? So we derived this as the discretized version. So we needed a del u by del x term and del v by del y term. And you can see that if I take this particular equation, so this is p at I comma j and time step n plus 1, that is equals to p at I comma j minus delta, which is the artificial compressibility, times dt, and this is del u by del x plus del v by del y. So we have this h that is common. So we have a delta x being equals to delta y, that is equals to h, and finally these terms are put together. And the pressure boundary conditions were also reported in the last lecture. There the pressures across the boundary are equal to each other, and that is what we are coding here as well. So just to take note of these, all these indexes that goes into the picture here, because every staggered grid arrangement has a different row and index, row and column index on which they operate, which makes it a slightly tedious, but because of the extra added effort, we are happy because we are getting a convergent solution at the end. So if you're not very good with bookkeeping, try making this grid by yourself and try to see which is the interior point, which is the boundary point. Because at some point I was also doing that. I was also very confused with this whole staggered grid drama. But when you draw the grids by yourself, it looks a bit childish, but it works. Let me tell you that. So finally, after getting the pressure boundary condition, we calculate the error based on the continuity residual. So what I do is for all the interior points, firstly we define error as 0, and then we say that the total error is error plus the continuity residual, and I'm taking an absolute value just to make sure that it is positive, so that it doesn't come out to be negative, and then the computer might think that the error is actually less than 0. So now comes the part about monitoring the error after every few time steps. So you remember that I told you that after every few iterations, we can also monitor the solution. And I say that if the remainder of the variable iterations, which I am defining as iterations plus 1 at the end of the time step, if that iteration is divided by 5000, go to the figure 1 and plot the iterations versus error. And I'm using this command called semilog y, which would be clear very soon once I would run this code. And it would hold on until we get the final solution. And I'm just labeling this plot because I told you this is a good practice. Once you make a plot, also make the corresponding labels to it so that you don't get confused at later time. So once the iteration finishes off, we say that appoint the u as u new, v as v new, and the pressure as new pressure, and make the iterations as iterations plus 1. So what I'll do is I'll run this particular code. So I'll hit Control Enter on all of these segments here. So we'll initialize the variables. So I'll go and show you that all the variables are indeed initialized. And finally, we'll start solving the governing equation. So this is the figure 1, which would keep tracking the error here. So the idea of this figure is to just graphically see how the error is evolving over time. So after every 5,000 iterations, the code would go back to this figure 1 and plot the error. And you would see something like this going on in a lot of software such as ANSYS Fluent, which plot a lot of error residuals while you are actually calculating the solution. So this is the kind of plot that you would expect here. And the command semilog y that I had used here, if you remember, so if I just quickly go back. So I have used this command called semilog y, and what it does is it plots the y-axis in a logarithmic form because I wanted to see the error residual being smaller than 10 to the power minus 6, and it is much easier to see such numbers on a logarithmic scale. So after I get the converged solution, you can see that this process stops. And the last bit of code here says that we have to map the staggered variables to the collocated variables. And what that means is, if I go to the notebook here, you see that the staggered grid points are all around the place, but the grid points on which we finally want the solution are these blue points. So if, let us say this is 1, 1 in the physical sense, then if I want to get the velocity at this particular point, the u velocity, I have to interpolate it from 1, 1 here and 2, 1. So u physical at 1, 1, it is obtained from the staggered u11 and u21. So if I want to write that in a computational way, I have to say that u final I, j, that is half of uij plus ui plus 1j. And the same process is done for the v velocity, that is, it is interpolated from the x staggerment. So we can see that it is from the column staggerment here. And similarly, the pressure at this particular point is obtained from the surrounding 4 pressure values, that is I, j plus 1, I plus 1, j, and I plus 1, j plus 1. So it is quarter of the surrounding pressure. So once we have done this, remember that after we get a converged solution, don't be happy straight away. Firstly, we have to make sure that our solution makes sense, because even a wrong solution can also be brought to a convergence level, but it is not the right solution. So to check that, we will compare our results with the results of Ghia et al. And I'll also put the link for this paper in the description. And from where you can also download the data sets. So what we do is we open a figure and we want validation for the center line u. So in that paper, there are data that corresponds to the center line u velocity in the vertical direction and the center line v velocity in the x direction. So firstly, we are validating this u as a function of y in the center direction. So what we do is, firstly, we plot our computed u velocity. So I go as u final, and this particular index, it corresponds to the centermost point, and this corresponds to the y location. So once I run this particular command, what we see is the variation of u as a function of y in our data. And then what I do is I open the Excel file which contains the solution. So I'll show you what that is. So in the Excel file, I have 2 columns. One corresponds to y and one corresponds to u. So I use the command called as Excel read and obtain that information in tab data and use the corresponding y Ghia and u Ghia to get the correspondingly y of y and u velocity from the benchmark solution. Then I go back to figure 11 using the hold on command so that I can plot on the top of it. And then I plot these 2 variables in the form of a circle. So it won't plot a line on top of that, but it would only plot so let me also run this particular command here and then plot the u and y of the benchmark. So you can see that the benchmark solution is plotted on the form of these circles, where the blue line, it corresponds to our corresponding solution. And I'll also name this axis here because that's a good practice to always keep that in mind. So the x-axis corresponds to u, where the y-axis corresponds to the vertical location. And the legend says that the Blue line is our computational solution, whereas the red marks corresponds to the benchmark solution. So now that we have got our results validated, we can be happy that our solution is converged and is right. So now we can go into the visualization aspect of this study, and we can also extract more data from the correct solution. So before I go into that, if you have been liking this video lectures and all the lecture series, please give a thumbs up to this video, as it also helps running this channel. So once we have got the correct solution, the next thing I would do here is to plot the contour of any particular velocity or the pressure field. So just like previous lectures, we can define the X domain and the Y domain, and after that we can create these X and Y mesh using the mesh grid command. So earlier, these X and Y domain, they were simply 1D array, and this mesh grid commands, it converts that set of 1D horizontal and 1D vertical array into a 2D grid set. So we have this, suppose if this is a 1/5 array in the horizontal and this is 1/5 array in the vertical, the mesh grid command would create a 5/5 grid set on which now we can plot the solution. So after doing that, so I'll run these 3 lines of code using right click and evaluate selection. Then I'll open a figure, and on the figure I would plot the contour. And in the contour, I need these X and Y grid points, and I can plot any kind of variable onto that whose size is similar to that. So X and Y are in this case 51/51, and U final is also 51/51. And I'll use 21 color levels in that contour. And after that, we can select the entire thing and run the command. So what the color map command does is, it uses this jet kind of color map and assign it to the contour. There are a lot of kind of color map which you can go through on MATLAB's website, and I'll also put some on the screen for you to see. And again, I'm using X label and Y label to label the corresponding axis. So you can see that this particular lid driven cavity problem, it has a top velocity of 1. So that is why you see a higher velocity here. And corresponding to this, there is a motion inside the fluid domain, which is not very obvious with this particular contour. But this particular contour, it gives you an idea that in some areas of this domain, you expect or you get some kind of negative velocities as well. So what that means is the fluid is going in the other direction. So this is the from left to right is the positive direction, and from right to left is the negative direction. You can also plot any other kind of velocity field such as U or V final. So I can do the same. I can use the same command and put the V velocities on the top of that. And you can also see in the V velocity, you have one region where the V velocity is positive and one region where the V velocity is negative. So you can think of it this way, because the lid was moving from left to right, the fluid here, it would primarily be going in the positive direction. And because the fluid would be accumulating here, so it would experience a force in the negative direction, and therefore it would sort of go towards the bottom, which is the negative Y direction. And the final thing that I'm going to plot or visualize this flow field is through the vector flow field. So what that does is, because we have at every grid point we have the magnitude of U and V velocity, so corresponding to that we can create a vector or velocity vector, and based on that vector field we can visualize the bulk of the flow. So the command that I'm using here, it's called as quiver, in which we need at least 4 arguments. The first 2 arguments corresponding to the grid sizes or the grid points. So we are informing, or we are storing the X and Y grid points in these X and Y variables, and then the corresponding U and V velocity fields are stored in the U final and V final. The number 5 here, it scales that velocity vector. So if I don't use a number here, the corresponding velocity field or the corresponding velocity vectors, they would be retaining their original ratio or the original length, but having a positive greater than one number, it stretches that vector, so it's easier to see them in the flow field. If you reduce this number, the length of those vectors would get shorter. So it is just for the convenient purpose. And finally, the last variable here called as k, it just says that those variables or those vectors would be plotted in the black color, which is represented by the k in MATLAB. So finally, if I select it and evaluate the selection, you can see that corresponding to every grid point, we have plotted these velocity vectors. So previously, if you remember, the vectors here, because they are pointing in upward direction, so they have a positive v velocity, and the vectors here, they have a negative v velocity because they are pointing downwards. And finally, you can also see that the vectors pointing in this direction, they have a negative u velocity, and that is why you saw that dark blue color in the u velocity contour. But the most noteworthy feature of the lid-driven cavity problem is the presence of these vortices. Because of the presence of walls, we are surrounded by the fluid, and because of the lid motion, these vortices, they are generated inside the flow field, and we can see a large vortex that is present at the center of the cavity. So one task that you can derive from here is, if you will change the Reynolds number, you will see that the size, the number, and the location of these vortices will also change. So that is something that you can try doing on your own. Once you have got your code right, you can try changing the Reynolds number without changing anything such as grid size or the domain time size, and you can see how these vortices, they change inside the flow domain. Also, if let us say you change the Reynolds number from 100 to 5000, and it is very likely that your solution may diverge if you would see that error plot. So what you can do to mitigate that is by dropping your time step or by increasing your grid size. So as long as the dt over dx ratio, it remains of a same or certain order, your solution would get converged. So you can try doing that on your own, and I hope that by the end of this lecture, which I know is quite long, so that is why I divided this entire lid-driven cavity flow in 3 particular segments, so I can address them one by one. So I hope that by now you would be having a better understanding of how to write a Navier-Stokes solver in MATLAB. So once again, if you have been liking this video series, please consider subscribing to this channel, because now onwards in the next few lectures, we would be talking about the simple algorithm, which is a very famous Navier-Stokes solver and probably one of the most widely used solvers as well. So we would be talking about the same lid-driven cavity flow problem, but from a point of view of simple algorithm. So that is something that we would be talking about in the next few lectures. So stay tuned for that and subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you can get the regular updates. And once again, before I say a bye-bye, I hope I will see you in the next lecture. Until then, take care.